Did you ever ask yourself, how in the world did we ever live, survive, without GPS? Did you ever ask yourself that? How did we ever do that? How did we ever exist without a map on our dashboard or easy access to directions on our smartphone? I think there's a whole generation out there that doesn't know what a AAA map is. Right? How many of you use GPS all the time? Raise your hands. Yeah. Can you remember back in those days when you had to use a map? You know, I can remember family vacations in the western part of the United States, and my dad is driving. It was either a 63 Cadillac. No, he never owned a Cadillac. He was a minister. Pontiac Catalina. He had a Catalina or a DeSoto or something. And at some point, he would pull over to a station on the side of the road, and he'd say, "Keith, get out, go in and see if they got any free maps." Right? And I bring the map out, and what would he say then? Y'all know. No. He'd say, "Give it to your mom." And the map would spread wide out, right? Almost the whole seat's covered, and there's this whole issue and all this stuff going on till we found out where we were and where one of the roads was that we would take to get where we wanted to go. You can't make this stuff up. We were going to catch a flight at Stapleton International Airport, before DIA moved out of Denver, way out of the city, and Stapleton's located on the near west side of the city itself. I was much younger at that time, and my dad, in his rush to get there, turned in this gated area, and all of a sudden car lights were flashing behind us, and he had actually driven on a runway. We would be on the nightly news, I'm pretty sure, today. Hard to imagine, isn't it? Hard to imagine even living without the GPS. The real problem, probably the only problem we have today in terms of mapping, is figuring out how to make it work. Still, I wonder, in our use of sophisticated technology, coupled with our love of instantaneous convenience, and added a touch of laziness, I wonder if we aren't missing something. I wonder if we haven't lost something. That something being the figuring out part. The figuring out part of the getting there. The success that's achieved through collaboration and cooperation, even the hearty disagreements, the arguing part. But most of all, we've lost the focusing part, that we work together. You see, we're so concerned about where we're going to get that we've lost that collaboration that it takes, that togetherness, that relationship building that occurred in figuring out the how to get there. We'd rather get on a plane and get there because it's all about the destination. It's all about enjoying where we want to be, and we've eliminated a lot of the stuff that used to happen in between. The kind of working together stuff that builds bonds between people and creates memories that endure forever. You see, when I tell that story about my father in the airport, he's right here. And somehow that's gone. Luke reminds me of this when I read the story of the road to Emmaus, because we look at this, and there a lot of characteristics in this story that are not different from any other resurrection story. Not very unique. You know, Thomas gets a bum rap because we call him Doubting Thomas because, everybody else got it and Thomas didn't. Well, that's not true. Read the stories. Thomas didn't ask for anything more than the rest of the disciples. He says, unless I see him, I'm not going to believe. Well, how many of these disciples in these Easter stories saw him and at first glance didn't know who he was? Mary didn't in the garden. And right here, these two individuals don't as well. Likewise, that there's nothing unique about this story that these disciples talked to him, that he spoke to them, that they saw something that resembled him, I guess, but he would appear and disappear. Those are not unique things. So what's different about this story? What does Luke have here that we should pay attention to? Two things. Two things that are very, very important in this painting. Setting and characters. The characters who are listed here and the setting in which they are listed. Look at this. We don't find any big names here. There are no marquee disciples here. There are no Peter, James, and John. What Luke throws in is an unknown. Cleopas. Who's Cleopas? Raise your hand if you know who Cleopas is. Raise your hand if you ever thought of calling your firstborn son Cleopas. Where did he come from? And the other person isn't even listed. His name is not even given. Either he's not that special, or Luke says there's a reason for not saying who he is. Some people believe it's Luke himself, but we don't know. And then add to that some other stuff. They're going to a place called Emmaus. Well, if you go to Israel, there are 9 places they think might have been Emmaus, 4 of which have credibility, but they really don't know. So on top of this, we read a story about a place that may not exist, or it does exist. It's anywhere, it's somewhere, it's nowhere, it's out there. It's a traveling, it's a journey story. It's a journey story with people like us. The destination is unknown, it's yet to be known, because the destination is not really what matters. It's that talking, that arguing, that journeying, that figuring out where you're going to go. Because it's out there, yet to be discovered. We like to say life is a journey. How many people say it? Life is a journey. Stop and smell the roses. You ever said that? We say it all the time. We just don't live it. Because we're all about getting to where we want to get. We laugh at kids say, are we there yet? Are we there yet? Are we there yet? Adults say it all the time. We're just more sophisticated about it. Because everything we do is where we want to get. You got to graduate high school so you get to college. You got to go to a good college so you get a good job. You want to get a good job because you want to have a good retirement. You see, it's always about the destination. It's always about the destination. We say life is a journey, but not so much. You do this, you work in the mailroom because it's going to get you somewhere else, right? Going to get you somewhere else. I was reading, two things. When Nixon was president, Haldeman and Ehrlichman used to go to the bathroom at a certain time because they knew that's when the president went, and it was the only time of the day they'd get to talk to him. You do this because it gets you that. You suffer through this to obtain or achieve that. We tell our children, suck it up, life's tough. It's the cross you have to bear to get somewhere someday. So intent upon arriving at where we think we should be, we leave no room for God's Spirit to guide, direct, and lead us to where God wants us to be. When Gene and I travel, we prefer to fly somewhere, rent a car, and figure it out. And that's always interesting. And all of the things I labeled about discussions, disagreements, arguing, and yet, in figuring out, well, let's go this way, let's stop here. Yeah, we have the pleasure and sometimes the serendipity of seeing and discovering things that you can't find in a travel logbook. Those gems that we fly by on the interstate of life. The truth is, somebody liked my sermon so much at the first service, they took my notes. You cannot make this stuff up. You can have these back when I'm done. Let me see if I can recoup. If I ever disappear, run from someplace, I'm going to Alaska. Because everybody there is hiding from something, right? And they're figuring it out. We noted that when we did our little trip there. What I'm saying to you is hope is a process of being led. Trust is the capacity to believe that God will lead you. And faith is a conviction that wherever you land, you'll be okay. Want me to say that again? Hope is the process of being led. Trust is the capacity to believe that God will lead you. And faith is the conviction that wherever you are led, wherever you end up, you will be okay. I've been with many people who face all kinds of situations in their life, some of which they face easily and not. And the people I most admire and see faith emanate the most, they just know that somehow it'll be okay. Not necessarily the way they wanted it to be, because let's be honest, how many of us had life turn out exactly the way we thought it was going to be? I'm firing him tomorrow. Then we'll see who has the last word on that. And I believe, I've experienced this all through my life in accepting pastoral calls. Gene was living in Colorado. I was living in western Nebraska. We met at university in the state of Washington. She had ties to Southern California. We loaded everything we owned in a 4x6 U-Haul trailer, drove from Spokane to Boston, never having been there before. We went up to the 4th floor. Our room was 14 by 14, and Jeannie started to cry. And then we moved back to Colorado and then to corporate world in Chicago, and never thought we would ever in our lives live here. And yet, when you look back on your life, the interesting thing about all of that is all of those locations we have been at enables us to better talk and know you. Because this church comes from all of those places. We can talk about burger places, we can talk about sports teams. I've eaten at Faneuil Hall, great chowder. And if we can look back and see, why don't we trust ahead? The inherent challenge is to avoid trying to think things have to look a certain way. I'm convinced the disciples couldn't recognize the risen Christ because they already had preconceived notions of what he was going to look like, had to look like, how it was going to turn out, and he didn't meet those. And the disciples on the Emmaus Road, they were talking, they were, I don't know, they weren't paying any attention. They were going through their own stuff. And it wasn't until they paused, pushed all that other stuff aside, did a simple thing of eating a meal, breaking bread, and they saw. You see, I believe we have God moments all the time. I truly believe that. It's just that we are so caught up in inconsequential things, a world of noise, that we miss them. We think they should look or be a different way, and they're past. When we were in Colorado, I went to visit someone at the Fort Collins Hospital, and I had some time in between the visit and the surgery, and I was going to go back and check on him. So I went to a bookstore. It was a Christian bookstore in a strip mall to just spend some time, and didn't find anything, and left after about a half hour, 45 minutes, and was walking back to my car in the parking lot when the young man behind the counter ran out of the store with a book in his hand, and I'm going, oh no, what's this about? What'd he see in me that he wanted to change? I had all these kinds of things I got to get back, all this stuff going on in my mind, let's be honest. He walked up to me and he handed me the book and he said, I perceive you need this. Small book called Tracts of a Fellow Struggler, written by John Claypool. Some of you may know him if you're from the Louisville area. 5 sermons that he preached in his congregation. The Sunday his son was diagnosed with a cancer, to the first Sunday he preached after his son's death. A book I still have on my shelf. A book I still give to families and individuals going through similar situations. I could have missed it. God moments, resurrection stories, Emmaus journeys. They happen all the time. Which leads me to my final take home. Cleopas and his companions, the unnamed guy, who maybe wasn't a guy at all, maybe it was one of the women. They were nobodies. Inconsequential, not big names. They were us. I'm a nobody. And in that, I find comfort and hope. I think Luke put it there for that reason. There's comfort and hope in recognizing these appearances, these God moments, these times when we figure things out on the way. They don't just come with the big names, the big flash. They come to us, the nobodies. And we, like them, we don't always get it. We think we do, but we don't always get it. We have to be told the story again and again and again. It's like the little boy who comes to church and his parents say, what do they teach you at church? He says, well, I don't know. I go every week and it's the same thing. Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. Well, somehow we need that repetition because we don't always get it. Luke wants us, the readers, to remember, all of us to remember, that we too are on that journey and we struggle with fear and we struggle with doubt, and yet Christ sticks with us to the end. So as you leave here today, I want you to take, two takeaways with you. The first of all is that no matter what your day calendar says, you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. None of us do. No matter how you plan, how you painted, all the things you put away to secure it, you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. I don't know. But by faith, what we do know is we don't go there alone. So turn your GPS off. Don't be afraid of the detours or the tunnels. Take time to pause, get out of the noise, and enjoy a little rye bread. You might just be surprised by what and who you see along the way. Amen.